to Pilgrim's Progress and the next section, which is entitled The Trial of Faithful. Now, this is simply the continuing saga of Christian and faithful who, we are told in the previous section, had traveled into a city called Vanity and went through a fair in that place run by the devil and his minions called Vanity Fair, which was a place where the shallow, hollow, idolatrous things of this world are presented as temptations to those who would go through. They become the idols, they become the realities, they become the importances and passions of those who belong to this world. Faithful and Christian, however, in coming into this place, rejected the temptations, the selling to them of the things that were there. They saw the shallowness, the hollowness, the vanity of these things, and they refused to buy them. In fact, they, as faithful, cried out and by truth. We're only interested in truth. The rest of it is lies, which it is. And so Bunyan paints for us this picture of what the Christian, not Christian, but the Christian, will walk through in the midst of dealing with this world and living as a material being in a material world that is governed, in a sense, by the Prince of Darkness, who is operating his lies amongst the people of this world. And at the end of the previous section, we saw that Christian and faithful were arrested and imprisoned for their unwillingness to embrace the things that were being offered to them in this place. There was no tolerance amongst the so-called tolerant for what was being offered, and instead they are arrested, and now faithful is brought to trial. Now you remember I said that the reason why faithful is brought to trial and not Christian is because the story would end pretty quickly if Christian is the one to be tried and executed. So Bunyan paints faithful as the one to be tried and executed in this section so that the story can continue on beyond it. So we turn now to this next section. We have been, now that we're set up, now we know where we are, by way of reminder, we can move into it. They were accused of being enemies to the trade of Vanity Fair. All right, that's the summary of what they're arrested for and what is about to happen. They are arrested and accused of being enemies to the trade of Vanity Fair. Now, notice the wording. The things of this world that are being offered as vanities, the trade of this world, is perceived to be an enemy to the Christian faith. And it is. That's what you get pictured here. That's what Bunyan is arguing. The systems of this world, the thinking of this world, the vanities of this world are, in fact, contrary to the nature of Christianity itself. So Bunyan simply reverses this. Okay, you as a Christian are an enemy to that system over there. And rightly so, from their perspective. Okay? The judge was Lord Hategood. Love his name. Tells me a great deal about who he is. He hates what is good. Now, anybody else notice the oxymoron in the name? Hate good? How can you hate good? Isn't that by definition an oxymoron? It seems preposterous on its face. You should love good and hate what is not good. But this man has built into the fabric of his own nature the fact that he hates good. Now, that's not by mistake, by the way. Bunyan paints that picture on purpose because that's the folly and the contradiction of the reprobate heart and mind. It hates what is good. Because good implies that you are not the one who defines what is good. There can only be one that defines what is good. by definition. But the world says, oh no, 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 I hate what is good because it implies that there is someone who has defined what is good, and I really hate him. And so therefore, by extension, I hate what he stands for, which is good. Again, it's a walking contradiction of humanity, but there it is. And he is the judge of this particular trial. Right? Bunyan paints him as a trial. Now, I don't think I don't think you can dispute what I'm about to say. Bunyan probably went through some sort of trial before he was put in prison, and so he's probably, in a sense, painting a picture of what he himself had experienced. Of the fact that he had been arrested for preaching as a nonconformist, right? He wasn't preaching what the official church wanted him to teach and wear and so forth, and so he was arrested and tried, and now he's in prison, and he's going to stay there for a great deal. So I think what he's doing is painting literally a picture of his own trial. Now, I want to suggest that he's also painting a picture of another trial. We'll come to that in a second. So the judge was Lord Hategood. In his defense, Faithful said that he was a man of peace and had only set himself against that which was against his Lord. So he says, look, okay, you've arrested me for doing what is evil, but I'm just standing against what's against my Lord. Okay, my Lord says that is evil, so I'm going to stand against it. I have to obey my Lord. Okay, that's a confession of obedience and submission, which is what he's doing. I'm walking through this town. I have only one master to obey, the Lord that I am pursuing in the celestial city. Okay, so that's his defense. It's a perfectly legitimate one, by the way, and it's perfectly right. We must pursue that which is good because it is commanded by the true and only Lord. Right? So it's a perfectly legitimate defense. Not to these knuckleheads, though. Okay? When pressed, all right, so when they pressed him harder on this, and they're pressing him, by the way, to confess that he's wrong, when pressed, he finally said, I defy Beelzebub, your king, and all his angels. I am not going to submit myself to the supposed Lord of this place. I have one Lord, his name is Christ, and I'm going to follow him. And I'm not going to place myself under the lordship of this one. This is the press that the world would have us to do. These vain things are designed to get us to make the Lord of this world our Lord. That's what they're designed to do. And Faithful says, I'm not going there. I have a Lord. He is the Christ. He is the true Lord, the only Lord. And I will not submit to you in the midst of these things. I will not do that. I have a Lord, I'm keeping him. Okay? That is the reality of the opposition that's going to come against us. Will you call Jesus Lord or will you call someone else Lord? There you go. And Faithful says, I have one Lord, I'm sticking with him. There came in then 3 witnesses, to wit, meaning their names being envy, superstition, and pickthank. They were asked if they knew the prisoner at the bar and what they had to say for the Lord the King against him. All right, so we're going to bring in some witnesses in this trial. We're going to bring some witnesses that are going to come and attempt to demonstrate that, in fact, Faithful is guilty, and so we need some witnesses to do this. Then stood forth envy. All right, the first of this is called envy. I think as I read through the 3 names, I get the distinct impression that Bunyan is painting 3 witnesses who are opposed to the concept of faithfulness in various different kinds of ways. One way through envy, one way through superstition, one way through what's called pigthank. I'll explain what that is in a minute. Okay. So the first is envy. The idea being the testimony that he will give, as you will see, seems to be that he is envious, not of Faithful per se, but envious, you might say, of what he believes to be true and knows to be true and wants to hold on to it. So it's not an envy of faithful, it's an envy of the world system and its ways. I'm going to hold that fast. So I think Bunyan is painting that in an old English sense of a jealousy for what I am. Right? It's kind of the same idea when God says, I am a jealous God. When we think of jealousy, we think of it as a sin. But it's being used in this sense of, God speaking here, I have a jealousy for my people in that I will not let them go. Okay, so that's the idea of envy here. I will not let these things go. They're mine, I'm holding on to them, okay? He's not envious of faithful. So he stands and says to this effect, My Lord, I have known this man a long time, and will attest upon my oath before this honorable bench that he is, and the narrative stops. He begins to speak. Now, this is, to me, one of the most humorous aspects of this book, right here. When Bunyan inserts an interjection on the part of the judge into the dialogue at this point. See the next sentence? Lord Hategood interrupted. Hold, give him his oath. Okay. That's hilarious. Now, you may not understand why yet, but let me explain why it's hilarious. It's hilarious because Bunyan is using the interjection by the judge to demonstrate something about this event. All of what's taking place here. Okay? So the judge, Bunyan puts these words on the lips of the judge. Okay, hold it. He claims he's doing this under oath. He's making the statement under oath. So let's apply an oath to him. All right? And you'll notice the next sentence. So they swore him in. And the quote is from James 5:12. Now, or the reference, I should say, is from James 5:12, which, as you remember, is James saying, But above all, my brothers, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation. Who is that written to? Well, that's written to believers. That's not written to reprobate men. That's written to believers. So Bunyan, by referencing James 5, is saying, this guy is going to take an oath so that when he lies through his teeth, it gives the whole thing a semblance of truthfulness and honesty. It's bizarre. It's hilarious. The guy starts to speak, and the first words out of his mouth are a lie. I've known this man for a long time. No, he hasn't. He lives in Vanity Fair. He lives in Vanity. He doesn't live in the original city. They don't know. He doesn't know him. That's a lie. But Bunyan puts this interjection in order to try to show that this whole thing is a sham. That's the point. The whole trial is preposterous and a sham. And the proof of it is, let's swear this liar in before he gets too far along in his lies. See it? Okay. Now, you remember I said a little while ago that this is also a picture of another trial. It's not just the trial of Bunyan himself, but it's probably in the back of Bunyan's mind also a picture of the trial of Christ Jesus on the night he was betrayed. It has very similar hallmarks to it. Witnesses who come in and judges and others are standing around. All right. And the picture of this, the best picture of this trial is painted, or the most detailed is painted in Matthew chapter 26. Starting in verse 57. So after Jesus is arrested, here's what the text says. Then those who had seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders had gathered. And Peter was following him at a distance as far as the courtyard of the high priest, and going inside he sat with the guards to see the end. Now, the chief priests and the whole council were seeking false testimony against Jesus that they might put him to death. Now, it's an amazing way to put that. They were seeking false testimony? I mean, are you suggesting they're actually purposely trying to get people to lie in order to condemn this guy? Well, that's how Matthew interprets what was taking place. That's precisely what they were doing. They were standing there making their testimonies, but everybody knew it was false. Verse 60, but they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. Now, isn't that interesting? They're looking for false testimony, and many false witnesses come, but they couldn't find any. The whole thing is really rather confusing, isn't it? What kind of a trial was this? A sham. There's no justice being pursued here. The outcome of the trial was predetermined. These people were not attempting to make a justice case by balancing the scales. No, they'd already made up their minds. The whole thing is for show. At last, two came forward and said, quote, this man said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to rebuild it in 3 days, unquote. That is a lie. Jesus didn't say that. He didn't say, I'm able to destroy this temple. No, what did he say? You tear it down and I'll rebuild it in 3 days. And we know, of course, as the gospel writers tell us, that he's not actually talking about the temple. He's talking about himself. And any sane human being would have known that. Now, they're not sane, okay? As we've already noted, the reprobates' minds are filled with contradictions, and they can't figure these things out. So they come forward and they make this statement. Now, you know as well as I do that the reason why the Pharisees or the scribes and the elders need the witnesses is in order to satisfy the law, which says you have to do this on the basis of 2 or 3 witnesses. Okay, so we're gonna make the trial look like it's legitimate. By getting a couple of people in that will paraphrase Jesus' words, we can condemn him for it. And the high priest stood up and said, have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you? But Jesus remained silent. He took the fifth. And the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Now listen to Jesus' reply. You have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. What is Jesus' answer to them? You think you're judging me? There's going to come a day when I'm going to judge you. And this trial is going to be the evidence of your guilt. What you are doing is heaping burning coals on your own heads. That's what you're doing. So go ahead, declare me guilty. You've already decided that anyways. That's why Jesus doesn't respond, doesn't need to. There's nothing he's going to say that's going to change their minds. So he says, go ahead, pass your little judgments. Make your little verdicts. But I tell you this, what you are doing is going to lead to the place where I am going to be the judge of all mankind. So go ahead and kill me and watch what happens after that. Now, I'm putting a lot of words in Jesus' mouth there, but you get the point, right? Bunyan puts this interjection on the lips of this judge in order to show us that this trial of faithful that he is recounting in this section is a sham. Because any such trial done against believers by a corrupted world system is by definition a sham. There is no justice in that world. There is no faithfulness to what is good. Even the judge's name tells us that he's not interested in good. He hates what is good. So Mr. Envy speaks. My lord, this man, notwithstanding his plausible name, meaning they call him faithful, but he ain't faithful to us, is one of the vilest men in our country. Somebody said something about somebody being vile this week. I'll leave it there. He neither regards prince nor people, law nor custom. Now, what is he saying? He's saying he doesn't regard prince nor people, law nor custom. Our princes, our people, our laws, our customs. He only is concerned about his own. Well, that's true. That's right. But you will notice that this spin doctor is making it look as though that's a bad thing. But doth all that he can to possess all men with certain of his disloyal notions, which he in the general calls principles of faith and holiness. He's trying to convince us to be faithful and holy. Oh, that's tragic. That's utterly tragic. His name is envy because he envies what is bad, what is evil, what is wicked. That's what he wants. And he is accusing faithful of having the temerity to actually call men to righteousness and holiness. What a wicked and awful thing that is. See how this is all upside down? Look, if you've never read C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters, I'd highly recommend it. Okay, but be warned. When you read this, the whole thing is written from the perspective of the devil. So you're going to have to read it upside down. Okay, you don't have to be physically upside down to read it. But you got to be thinking backwards. What the devil in the story, the uncle, tries to convince his fledgling helper, a demon, to do, you have to think of it exactly backwards. C.S. Lewis wrote it exactly backwards. I'd suggest to you that that's precisely what Bunyan is doing here. He's writing this backwards. Everything that comes out of the mouth of envy, you and I would say, well, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to put off the princes of this world and the things of this world, and we're supposed to convince men of principles of faith and holiness. They spin it as though that's wicked. We know it to be good and right. And in particular, envy said, I heard him affirm that Christianity and the customs of our town of Vanity were diametrically opposite and not to be reconciled. You think that the things of Christianity are opposite of the things of this world? This is why we are warned over and over and over again in the New Testament to not embrace the world and its thinking, because it's opposite of what it is that Christ would have us to embrace. By which saying, my Lord, he doth at once not only condemn all of our laudable things, our laudable doings, I should say, but us in the doing of them. This guy has the audacity to come to town and tell us that our idolatry is wrong. That we should stop loving the things of this world, the vain things of this world. We should stop loving those things. This guy has the temerity to tell us to do that. See how it's spun? It's exactly upside down. No, that's precisely what we tell the world. That's precisely what we're telling the world. No. We're not going to be loyal to your systems. We're not going to be loyal to your way of thinking, to your trinkets of vanity, to your idols, to your understandings of morality, which are exactly opposite of the understandings of morality that God himself has imposed. No, we're not going to do that. Envy says he's wicked. Isn't that interesting? But that's the thinking process of the world. See, the world thinks it holds the moral high ground. They couldn't be more wrong. They have no leg to stand on, which is what envy basically admits in his testimony. So then they called the second man. His name is Superstition. His name is Superstition. That word, by the way, is a word that reflects Acts chapter 25, verse 19. Bunyan doesn't put a reference to it, but I want to read that verse to you. Another trial. Interesting that Bunyan uses this word. It's possible that he gets this word out of this trial. Okay, and it's found in Acts chapter 25 when Paul is brought before Festus and Agrippa. You remember? Late in the book of Acts, as he is arrested by the Jews in Jerusalem, he spends 4 years in Caesarea. While he's there, he undergoes a sham trial before Festus and Augustus. He appeals to the emperor. As a Roman citizen, he appeals to the emperor, and then he's ultimately shipped off. And the end of the book recounts his making his way to Rome. But in chapter 25, as he is standing before Agrippa, I'll start in verse. Let me start in verse 17. So when they came together here, I made no delay, but on the next day took my seat on the tribunal and ordered the man to be brought. Okay, so this is Festus speaking of Paul being in prison. Okay, so he says, when they came together here, I made no delay, but on the next day took my seat on the tribunal and ordered the man to be brought. When the accusers stood up, they brought no charge in his case of such evils as I supposed. In other words, he says, I expected them to bring some sort of charge against Paul that would stand up to scrutiny, but guess what? They couldn't. Paul's not really guilty of doing anything against even the Jewish religion, as it turns out. Verse 19, now catch this. Rather, they had certain points of dispute with him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who was dead, but whom Paul asserted to be alive. That word religion is translated in some translations as superstitions. They had their own superstitions about a certain Jesus who was dead. Okay, so this guy is saying, Festus is saying, look, I don't buy any of that whole thing about Jesus, and that's an intramural squabble on their point. They have these superstitions that they are operating with, and Paul has a certain superstition that this Jesus was actually raised from the dead, and they dispute that. Okay. It seems reasonable to me that Bunyan would have picked up this here to bring superstition into play. That's why his name is where he is. I think that might be the case. I can't prove that, but it seems to make sense to me, given, again, another trial, some sham witnesses, and, same idea. Okay. So they called Superstition and asked what he could say for their lord the king against him. All right, so what can you say now, Superstition? You tell us what you think about all of this. Okay, Envy has had his time. Let's talk. Okay, so he says, my lord, Superstition said, he is a pest. Okay, good. Because the best kind of accusation is a character assassination, right? It's kind of common in our day, isn't it? If you can't make an argument, just call the person you're arguing with a name. That's what he does. You're a pest. He's a pest. I have no great acquaintance with this man, nor do I desire to have further knowledge of him. Okay, I don't want to know anything about him. For I heard him say, now catch this, for I heard him say that our religion was naught, and such by which a man could by no means please God. There's where the superstition comes, I think. We in this world have our religious superstitions. Okay, because all men do. The human race is extraordinarily religious. You can go to the far corners of the earth to people who are isolated, and they will have religious practices that they will do. Human beings are religious by nature. Now, I argue, that it comes right out of the fall. When Eve ate from the tree, the result of that was, what must I do? Okay? It became cemented in the hearts of reprobate men, fallen men. I've got to figure out how to get back to God. So they've invented myriads of religious systems. Many of them. Many of them. And so this guy, superstition says, has come to our town, and he's told us that on top of our worldly pleasures and idolatries, the religions that we have put in place are also worthless. Because you see, that's what religion really tries to do, doesn't it? It tries to make worth out of that which is worthless. That's what religion tries to do. It tries to make worth out of that which is worthless. Men running around in ceremonies and rituals and garbs of all kinds, with all kinds of incense and all kinds of things, prayers and whatever, trying in some way to make the worthless seem worthwhile. That's what religion is. I grew up in a religious system that, without a doubt, to me, was the most worthless form of human practice on the face of the earth. It had no value. I left it at the age of 20. I've said this before, right? I left it at the age of 20 out of sheer boredom. It had no value to me. Hours and hours and hours, standing, kneeling, sitting, standing, kneeling. We got our calisthenics every week. But it produced nothing. It didn't make anything better. It wasn't anything more worthwhile. Okay. And the Christian comes along and says, faithful comes along and says, yes, your religious practices don't make your worthless idols any more worthwhile. They don't accomplish anything. And superstition says, he had the temerity to tell us that. These sayings of his, my Lord, your lordship, very well knows necessarily what will follow. In other words, if he keeps talking like this is what's going to happen. To wit, that we still do worship in vain, are yet in our sins, and finally shall be damned. You are practicing your religion. You travel over land and sea to make a convert, and you make him twice the son of hell that you are. Here you are. This man has had the temerity to come to town and not only tell us that all of our precious things are actually worthless, and he's had the temerity to tell us that all of our religious practices upon which we build on top of that, they're also worthless too. Which leads us to Mr. Pickthank. Now, this is a 17th century word that we no longer use, obviously. You've probably never heard it before. But a pickthank is a sycophant. Someone who kisses up for all he's worth. Or, to put it in more modern language, he is a name dropper. He is the kind who thinks that because he hangs around with the right people, he's cool. And so he drops a name. You know, I once knew Paul Washer. Did you know that? So what? He doesn't know me, trust me. Okay, so Mr. Pickthank comes along, and now he gets to testify. Now you'll notice envy is envious of the things of the world, trying to protect the things that they considered important. Superstition is trying to protect the realities of religion, trying to make all of that work. And think is going to come and try to cover it all over with a sense of importance. We are important. Don't you understand, Mr. Faithful, how important we are? Then was Thank sworn and bid say what he knew in behalf of their lord the king against the prisoner at the bar. All right, tell us what you know. My lord, and you gentlemen all, this fellow I have known of a long time, right? And have heard him speak things that ought not to be spoken. For he has reviled our prince Beelzebub and called you, my lord, an ungodly villain. Okay, now catch the irony here. Okay, here's a guy who's all about knowing people, all right? He's all about knowing people. We'll see that more in a second. He's all about the company he keeps. And his accusation against Faithful is to say, this guy doesn't think highly of any of you. In other words, he's exactly the opposite of me. This is Thank kissing up to the judge, whereas Faithful does exactly the opposite. I'm not kissing up to you. You are wicked and a villain, and I will have nothing to do with you. Your reputation doesn't save you, is another way of saying what Faithful has said. I despise you. Oh, and I despise your prince Beelzebub because, by the way, all of you are actually from him. He is your father. Jews didn't particularly like it too well when Jesus told them that their father was the devil, did he? And he hath spoken contemptibly of our prince's honorable friends, whose names are, all right, here comes the name dropping, the Lord Old Man, the Lord Carnal Delight, the Lord Luxurious, the Lord Desire Vainglory, my old Lord Lechery, Sir Having Greedy, with all the rest of our nobility. All right, now, we don't need to spend too much time in each of the names, okay, because Bunyan doesn't. He just throws them out there, but he's kind of giving us this idea of these people who think they're something special by virtue of their character, but their character actually reveals a lot about who they are. Probably Mr. Old Man, as best as I can guess, is someone who thinks he's wise by virtue of his age, which is not always true, is it? Not always true that the older you are, the wiser you are. I've met some very unwise old people. So this is Mr. Old Man who thinks he's great. And then there's Mr. Lord Carnal Delight. I'm sorry, I called him Mr. That was wrong. He's Lord Carnal Delight, okay? He's one of the princes of the nobility under Beelzebub. He's one of the chief guys. He's the Carnal Delight guy. He's the guy that's all about the flesh. He's all about pleasure in this world. And then there's Lord Luxurious, that's all about the luxurious things of this world, the riches and those kinds of things, right? And then there's the Lord Desire Vainglory, the proud, the one who really wants respect and position because, you know, he's something special. My old Lord Lechery. Lechery is a form of sexuality that is inappropriate. You've heard of a lech, right? Someone who's a lech. You know, an old man who's a lech, hangs around with the young girls a little too much, right? Okay, that's the idea, a lechery. So he's the guy that's into the sexual component of all of this. And then there's Sir Having Greedy, who is the greedy guy. So it's almost as though superstition gives us a list of the 7 deadly sins. It's almost what he does, in a sense. These are the princes of this land that this Faithful guy comes to town and repudiates and says, along with all the rest of our nobility, that they're not to be respected, they're not to be obeyed, they're not to be followed. Well, rightly so. That's what Christians would say. And he hath said, moreover, that if all men were of his mind, if possible, there is not one of these noble men should have any longer a being in this town. Here's what superstition puts on the lips of faithful, which is true, which is if the gospel had its way with the people of the town, such that their hearts would be changed and their minds would be changed, such that they would know what is good and what is right, none of these things would be in the town anymore. Because these are exactly the opposite of the mindset of Christ. This man, superstition said, Pickthang says, had the audacity to come to this town and tell us, okay, he tells us, you need to get your mind right. Because your thinking processes are all skewed by this vanity all around you. The devil has tried to convince you that the things of this world are important, even though they're vanities. He's tried to convince you that your religions will somehow make you right with God. And he's tried to convince you that you keep the right company with the right kind of people and the right kinds of thinking processes, the worldly thinking processes, you will have a good life. All of it is a lie, every single bit of it. What faithful says is the truth, which the three men spin into hatred for him. This is what the world does to Christians. Why do they hate us? Why do they hate us? I asked this question last time, remember? We are the ones that go out and do what is good. We help people. We care for people, you know. Baptists are the ones that build hospitals, right? We're the ones that build orphanages, and we're the ones that build food pantries and things like that. We're the ones that do that kind of thing. That's what Christians do. Yet they hate us. We do good for them, and they hate us. Well, here's the reason why. Because their reprobate hearts have so warped their thinking that they cannot see what is good. They hate it. It's for their benefit, but they hate it. And the reason why is because they hate the one who established it. They hate the one they first put on trial and killed. And so they have no qualms of putting you on trial and killing you either. I think 21st century American Christians are going to have to get used to the idea that we are no longer going to be wanted in the society. We may have started this nation out with a Christian foundation, but we are no longer wanted. Now that secularism has become the official religion of this nation, and it is, we are no longer allowed in the public space because we have the audacity to do exactly what faithful does. We go and we tell these people, listen, the monuments that you are building to yourself are worthless. And this religion that you've imbibed is nothing but destructive. It doesn't cause human flourishing, it causes human destruction. One of the states yesterday passed an assisted suicide law. Another one. People go to the polls and they vote for death. Why? Because their minds are so messed up and corrupted by the fall that they think that's good. Well, let's give this person who's in great pain, let's give them the opportunity to off themselves so they can get out of their pain. That's how much they think of life. And of course, abortion referendums pass all the time, don't they? The systems that you are building are false. The religions that you have raised up don't bring human flourishing. And all of the results of that come into your lives that produce misery and disgust, you look at them and promote them. And you desire them. You think it's perfectly fine to say to a man who dresses in a dress and thinks he's a woman that that's okay. That is so contrary to the very core of what it means to be human. Human, not Christian, human. But when we say that, they want to get rid of us. When this pig-thank had told his tale, the judge shouted at Faithful, "You renegade, heretic, and traitor! You deserve to live no longer, but to be slain immediately upon the place. Yet that all men may see our gentleness towards thee, let us hear what thou, vile apostate, have to say." Now listen carefully to what the judge just said. We have already decided your fate. Your fate was predetermined when you walked into this room. We had already decided. Look, the three gentlemen who just spoke, all they did was confirm to us that what we're doing is right. But we'd already determined. It's been predetermined. So he casts judgment and issues a sentence of death even before Faithful has an opportunity to make a case. Even before. Faithful, you remember, was allowed to say a few words earlier, but that's been drowned out by the witnesses that have come, that Judge Hategood has promoted, and even gone so far as to say, put him under oath so it makes it look like he's telling the truth. He's been prejudged to be destroyed. And that's what the world does to Christianity. They're not interested in listening to your arguments. They're not listening. They don't care about your apologetics. They don't. I would argue that the only people who will listen to your apologetics are those that the Spirit of God is actually doing some sort of work on. The rest go about their merry way, and they're like the three monkeys that see no evil and hear no evil. What's the other one? Speak no evil. That's what they are. They're walking through the world with their hands over their ears. La, 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 la. I don't want to hear it. That's how the world considers us. Listen, my brothers and sisters, listen, hear me. This is normal. We haven't experienced this kind of persecution in America yet. But I tell you, there are brothers and sisters all over this planet right now that are facing existential crises by virtue of calling the name of Christ. They're being slaughtered in Nigeria right now. Somebody has finally taken notice. The fact is, this is ordinary. Jesus himself said, listen, if they persecuted me, they will persecute you. If they killed me, they'll kill you. They'll drag you before synagogue leaders and put you on trial and kill you. Because they hate him. They hate the Lord of glory. And they thought they could get rid of him. The devil thought he could get rid of him. Didn't succeed. God used that to accomplish great things. So this is how the world reacts to what it means to be a follower of Christ. And look, you want to be a Christian? You want to be a follower of Christ? Good for you. But this is the cost. This is what's going to cost you. It's very reasonable that you might be arrested, thrown in jail. I wonder, frankly, if this particular video will survive on YouTube. The fact is that the world hates us because they hate our Lord. Our response is to be faithful to him. We're not going to buy the things of this world. We're not going to buy into their religions. We're not going to buy into their systems of thinking. We're going to keep our eyes fixed on Christ. They can do with us what they want to do, but the good news is we are not citizens of this country. Take your best shot Even as God said to Satan, go ahead, throw your best at Job. You cannot change who he is. You cannot change who he is because I'm speaking for God now, I have declared him to be righteous. I have made him my own. And those who belong to Christ have been made to belong to him by him. We must keep that in mind. We are not called to an easy, comfortable walk. No. We're called to a life of preaching truth in the midst of hate against us. And all God's people said, what a killjoy this guy is. But here we have it, from a man who himself is being persecuted simply for wanting to preach the truth in the church.